Hello and welcome to Xperienced TV, the show that's like a hot cup of cocoa on a wet, windy day. Last week we were at VRTGO in Newcastle, where we was taking a look at some of the latest developments in virtual reality and listening to some of the biggest speakers speak. There was some interesting things there, like this VRGO, where you sit on it and control your virtual reality game. So instead of move your ass, move with your ass. Wonderful. Anyway, while we was there, we listened to a number of talks, and it all ended with a panel where people predicted the future of virtual reality. Now, personally, we think that virtual reality in the next couple of years is really going to take off, but it all depends on the support that it gets and the applications that get delivered for it. Personally, we're looking forward to the assembly from nDreams, and hopefully there'll be a lot more interesting ways to interact, like this thing. But anyway, without further ado, let's get on to that panel.
So the point of this panel is a rather broad and bold one, which is to try and make some predictions about the next year, in particular in VR. What we'll do is, I think we'll start with Joe, and it can be a prediction or at least a trend you think is the most interesting and exciting, and it can be from anywhere: game design, hardware, middleware, monetization outside of games. But Joe, do you want to dive in and just pick what you think is one of the most interesting trends in VR for the next 12 months?
Yeah, thanks for starting with me.
That's all right.
It's difficult, I think. I think it's really difficult to predict, mainly because of the fact that there's so many different factors involved. There's so many different platforms, there's so many different kind of potential markets. I'll be just happy when there's like a good success for as many different platforms as possible. And I predict that that's going to happen. I just don't, I don't know how or when, but I think it's just because of the sheer amount of content that's being developed. I think we're going to see some really kind of headlines for each platform. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they are. In terms of more in-depth predictions, that's my loose one. I know that it's going to be good.
So your Arduino project with the horses isn't able to predict accurately the future of VR?
Well, we could try, but it's about as random as that, I think.
Oliver, I'm going to spring this one on you next then. If you could give a little introduction, because Oliver has dashed up from London to stand in for a colleague. So if you wanted to give a quick intro to who you are, and then maybe then dive straight from that into making a bold prediction about a kind of key trend or interesting or exciting trend in VR. Go.
Okay. Hi, I'm Oliver from Rewind. We're a small production studio based just outside London. My prediction for VR, specifically for 2016, I think that I'm going to start by making a distinction. I think that virtual reality and 360 video are separate things. 360 video is the reality that has been captured. It is not intrinsically a virtual reality, and therefore should be classified as a different thing. So I'm going to stick with virtual reality for a moment.
Okay.
And I think that in 2016, most people's initial experience of virtual reality will be branded content, as has been said earlier on. It won't be finding a PlayStation VR at someone's house or finding that one friend who's got an Oculus. It'll be trade shows, out-of-home marketing, things in Westfield or at any number of sporting events. I think this will be most people's first contact with VR, and that's probably a good thing because marketing at the moment has the budgets for this sort of activity, which is not necessarily there as a provable business case, as a commercial selling.
Well, and once you've all given your prediction, we can dive back in some of the points raised, so you're all welcome to agree or disagree with Oliver and the rest of you in a moment. Will, what did you want to go for?
You're probably not too surprised to hear me start to say that cardboard VR, I think it's going to be the thing that's going to be really powering the adoption of VR in the mass market. And I think you're going to have big brands, online advertisers subsidising this technology to get it into the hands of people. I think there's been some discussion that I've heard before about, isn't it bad that we're putting like a poor VR experience into people's hands as their first VR experience? Shouldn't we be showing them the high end and showing them how awesome VR could be? And I'm not convinced about that. The first time I used a VR device, I was just blown away. When I heard about it, and I heard what Google were doing, I thought it sounded ridiculous. And then I tried it, and it was awesome. I thought it was fantastic. And the fact that you can give someone this fun device, and they've already got the hardware in their pocket, it's going to be what's going to be the motor that drives people up the chain and starts wanting to buy the higher grade kit. But without cardboard VR, I don't think we'll be driving that.
Fantastic. Patrick, from the mists of time that was this morning, do you want to throw out your prediction?
Yeah, sure. So my prediction is sort of twofold. It's slightly bad, slightly good. The bad bit is that I think there's been a little bit too much hype growing, particularly in America, but maybe a little bit here as well, over just how exciting and how big 2016 is going to be. It's going to be the start of VR, and it's really, really cool. But for developers, if you're expecting VR devices to kind of take off like a rocket and suddenly make lots and lots of money immediately, you need to have a note of caution. I think VR is going to take a while to grow, particularly with Oculus and Vive, because they need very, very expensive PCs. So I think don't expect to make lots and lots of money in 2016. If you can get through 2016, and then I think we'll be in a great position, but it's going to take a little while. The slight positive to that is I think PlayStation VR is going to take out of the box a lot quicker than the other high-end VR devices, because it's just plug and play. It's so simple. You don't need a high-end PC. And I think that will surprise people actually.
And so last but not least, Jason.
Yeah, I mean, I actually agree with the kind of 360 video piece. I think for a lot of people, that's actually going to be the hook that gets them into it, because it's very easy to relate to, it's very easy to visualise. I was talking to the guys outside, the 360 event guys, around the stuff they do with the concerts, and they're talking about weddings where, someone could have a 360 camera and they can go back and revisit the wedding. And I think that kind of stuff, for a lot of people, is very, very easy to bring to life. And I actually think that would be a real big driver of VR. And I also think David Cameron will buy Gear VR.
What gives you that huge confidence?
79 quid, you can't not buy it.
Great. Well, let's just quickly go back over some of them. So Oliver brought up kind of the out-of-home branded experience. Did anyone want to touch on that, even if it's just agreement or disagreement? How important is that kind of out-of-home experience for people getting that kind of conversion experience?
I think it's a bit of an arms race at the moment. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what the return on investment is, but there's a lot of money being spent out there today by big brands to engage people in new ways, and people are being quite experimental about it. And just in the last 2 or 3 months already, Play Canvas has been working with some big London agencies to do some digital out-of-home experiences. We did the Rugby World Cup on the Samsung screen at Piccadilly Circus, and that wasn't a VR experience, but you kick a ball over goalposts, and you see your kick on the big screen. But the point is, there's a lot of money being spent, and VR is a new tool that these companies can exploit. And some of these things will fail, but a lot of money will be spent, getting to the point where people understand it and they can get a good return on investment on it.
I think I've just come back from China, and in China there's going to be very little high-end market because there just aren't gaming PCs. What they are doing a lot of is out-of-home entertainment. And I saw a few devices which are already in shopping centres and in arcades where you can experience VR, and they have motion built in, and they're really gorgeous. And they work really nicely, and I suspect you'll see more and more of that kind of stuff coming through in certain territories. So I think it depends on where you are in the world.
Okay. And what about the potential of cardboard VR and visor that we've got right here that we'll generously left on stage? And do people agree? Jason, perhaps do you think that'll be one of the other, maybe the Liberal Democrats or Labour will be buying all this? No, I just wanted, sorry, any of you just wanted to how important you think those platforms are.
I agree with the previous point that I think all of this stuff has a massive part to play, whether it's, I actually think cardboard, the same example I gave in my presentation around the stuff they're doing in the States, is massively important about having an entry point into VR that allows people to buy into it at an early age or from an early point. I think that's massively important. So I think all this stuff has a really key role to play.
And that point that you actually, as Jason brought up about the importance of 360 video, because most of you on this panel, apart from Oliver, are kind of in the more kind of games and that kind of content. How inspired or enthusiastic are you about video's potential, perhaps even in relation to gaming content and how they'll serve each other?
Can I?
Yeah, you're allowed to talk as well, Oliver.
So I actually really like 360 video, despite my earlier delineation between the two. We produced recently a piece of 360 video content for Strictly Come Dancing, YouTube, etc. But it's Strictly Come Dancing is the most new piece of YouTube content they've ever put up, which, considering the audience for Strictly, is ridiculous. But we showed it to a lady in an agency yesterday afternoon in a gear car. And she sat there for 7 minutes and watched this piece. And when she came out, she literally had tears rolling down her face, which is the second time I've ever seen anyone cry from watching any sort of 360 or VR experience. And it proves that it can really get to people. It's a complete sensory takeover. You have nothing else apart from your ears and your eyes. And she was convinced. She felt like she had sat in the front row of the audience and watched this show. She thought she'd never get to go and see live. And that's, I think, where it has a potential to be really powerful.
I've seen a few really nice 360 experiences. I think it's possible to do it very badly, but I can imagine. There's a great demo on the Gear VR store actually of I think it's a Saturday Night Live show or something, and you're in the audience seeing the people in front of you, and you can actually look around and you see the people, the guests being queued up, and the cue cards, and the floor manager giving his signs and all that kind of stuff, and it's pretty cool actually. You really feel like you're there, and I think for live news broadcasts and things like that, actually being able to look around in the war zone, wherever it happens to be, that's going to be quite special. Having said that, as Jonathan mentioned earlier, a football match from the side where you're in the seat and you can't see the detail of what's going on because of the resolution isn't going to be very good. So I think it's about the concept.
And in fact, I wanted to talk kind of another part, and I guess going back to more digitally virtual content rather than live action stuff is, and Patrick, maybe starting with you for this one because you guys nDreams to produce some of this, kind of the experience rather than the game. How important is that in engaging people with VR?
I think it's going to be hugely important. I mean, we were surprised how well received. So we did Perfect Beach, which is like, if you've had a stressful day, you put the headset on and you just chill. You listen to an audiobook or an album or there's a meditation track, and you just look at the fish and the birds. And there's no score, there's no goal, there's no game, and it's performed really well. And we've been very, very surprised by that. Well, we've been pleased as well. And that's just a simple experience. You can imagine what's going to happen down the line. And I think there's so much more mass market, and they're very easy. You don't need to be a gamer, you don't have skill or twitch or reactions. You can just experience something. And I think that's going to be a huge category that just wouldn't exist on any other platform at all.
I completely agree. I think we are so in the infancy of this stuff. We don't really know who the target market for this stuff is, right? We know we're all early adopters, we're all passionate about this stuff, but we know there's an absolute chasm between the early adopters and the mass market, and I guess it's all a process of working out what content will appeal to those people. I guess at the moment we don't know yet, and I love that. It's brilliant. So I think a lot of it is going to be really fun as developers try and work out what sort of stuff resonates with different people, and I guess also what sort of people are using what sort of device, and again, what content is more adequate to that.
Cool. Going back to Patrick's earlier point about kind of meeting expectation, us journalists have covered virtual reality a lot. There's been a lot of excitement, a lot of people haven't had the experience. I just wanted to, I guess one of the nicest things about the virtual reality experience, since I guess if you define the Oculus Kickstarter as kind of the beginning of the new generation, is this kind of the knowledge sharing. I talked about it at the beginning of the day, but the knowledge sharing, the collective experience. It's kind of collectively facing and collective learning. It's been one of the most powerful tools in VR. I wondered whether you want to talk about expectation or just other challenges that remain for VR, where the collective power of people involved in VR could be most... Sorry, I'm not working this very well. Where, like, the most significant challenges and the ones that are most important in terms of the industry's collective power.
Things like motion sickness and that kind of stuff from a technical standpoint is pretty tricky. I know at Droidcon a few weeks ago there were a lot of people talking about how they overcome that, because a lot of people just don't get on with it at all, especially with how it handles acceleration and how that works. So I guess there's a lot of work going into that.
I think there's also quite a lot to be done in terms of standardisation of input and user experience. It's something that nowadays is kind of commonplace in say like mobile gaming. The fact that you do a level and then you get either 1, 2, or 3 stars. Like really standard kind of means of content when it comes to the interface. I think that's going to be something that's just going to have to happen naturally. I think we'll fumble around a little bit, and then eventually people will find something that works and something successful, and then everyone seems to copy that. So I think we'll see some interesting directions in that regard.
Well, to slightly harp on my earlier point, I think again one of the biggest problems we currently have is a lack of appropriate language to describe half of the things we're trying to build. We do keep on shoehorning cinematography terms into creating VR narratives and experiences, but we have no frame. So the 120 years of cinematography that we know and understand is gone. So trying to repurpose that terminology for the new experiences that we're creating is a very troubling thing, especially when you're trying to communicate it to people like brands, agencies, more traditional media people. And I think that over the next probably year or two, we will spend a lot of time learning what the appropriate terminology. I mean, is it horoscopy? Is it stereoscopic? What's the appropriate term?
Any other challenges that are pressing ones?
I think there's a real opportunity for us to work together. This is new genres. I think you will see the birth of new genres will be a massively exciting thing. We're here at this huge uncharted landscape, and we have no idea where the edges of the space are. We're just learning. And I think developers are going to find new types of games, new genres that weren't possible before. Perfect Beach and Experiences are a start for that, but there's so many other things I think out there, and that's going to be fun. Watching and sharing what everybody does, and then taking them off in different directions and blending new genres together. It's going to be great.
I think we're in a perfect position for that as well. Like with the rise of independent development in the games industry, and the fact that you can go away and create Euro Truck Simulator, and that be a huge success for the company that are producing it. And it's a game about driving potatoes from Newcastle to Amsterdam in a truck. But it's a commercially viable product. I think that's absolutely fantastic. I think it's great that you can produce something for a very niche market, and thanks to digital distribution, you can get it to a lot of people and enough people to sustain their business. But also it means that we can now viably explore these crazy directions with potential content. So it's not only is it like a vast open space that we can explore, but there's people that will help make it happen as well through purchasing the products, because there's a niche interest all over the place, and I think we're only beginning to really discover that.
Yeah, I think just one other thing, got on a tangent, but is just understanding how we're going to make money from all this, right? And I think that's not entirely clear to me right now. I mean, when you look at the mobile landscape, you've got app stores, you've got Apple and Google there, and you can monetize very effectively through those channels. Who's going to be the App Store or the YouTube or the whatever, the equivalents for all of these places where you can monetize for VR? Is VR just going to be like part of those ecosystems, or is it going to be separate? And maybe there are going to be new business models that come along based specifically around VR. I mean, we don't really know this stuff right now, and it makes it very difficult to plan and set up businesses when you're not really sure you're actually going to be commercializing what you're doing. But all I can say is, to go back to the end of the talk that I was giving, where you've got hundreds of billions of dollars being spent on advertising. Money's going to come into this somehow. But yeah, it's a little bit scary when there isn't much of a precedent.
There's a lot of nodding in the audience as you were speaking there. That's obviously a matter on people's minds. Speaking of the audience, I've got a few more questions, but I think it's fair that I shouldn't hog all the questioning as we've managed to get all these people together. There's already a hand in the very back row, so if we could run the microphone. Sorry, I keep sending you to the opposite of wherever you're sat.
Thank you. The question about the money, show me the money, I think is on a lot of people's minds. What advice would you give to kind of fledgling startups, indie teams, students that are moving into VR, looking at VR, and how they should be positioning themselves to potentially survive maybe the first 1 or 2 years when VR is still trying to take off?
That's a really good question. It's tricky because it is going to be hard to make a lot of money just doing VR in 2016, I think. And you might want to consider whether there's a way of doing a mobile VR title, but you can also take something from that and get a non-VR version, for example. I think, historically in mobile, finding a niche like people who like driving trucks and then hitting it really well is a great way to succeed. And I suspect even in VR, rather than trying to make a game for everybody, trying to make a game for an audience you can market and talk to and tell about the game might be a really smart move. But I think just learning the skills about VR and understanding it, even if you can make small, quick games, is going to be really, really key, because VR is going to be huge, and there are so many non-gaming opportunities as well on the fringes. Education and training and cross-route and all sorts of crazy things. There are going to be so many opportunities for VR developers who know what they're doing over the next few years. So I think if you can get some good demos up and running, go start networking and talking to people, you may find that even if you're not making the AAA game you want to, you're still making a lot of money from a slightly different area of VR.
Just to add to that briefly, if we look at the adult entertainment industry model, currently, very high level, you can currently make quite a lot of money in that sphere, unless you're one of the really big studios churning out loads of content, by picking the tiniest little niche. And people are still willing to pay for niche content. The truck simulator, for instance.
Yeah.
And the specialisation, as we know, that particular industry needs a lot of technology in various ways, the streaming of video on the internet, for instance. And how that applies to VR, I think, is going to be very important. Not necessarily the industry, but the niche content.
Yeah.
Sticking with that is
Excalibur, who put out trucking simulator and cargo ship simulator and so on, have done really, really well without too much expenditure. So it proves niche can work in games. And I presume, the adult industry is a video content of sorts. Anybody else in the audience? Fantastic.
Given how much scope there is for immersion and escapism, and then you consider the problem of internet addiction, gaming addiction, in places like South Korea and China, what are the warnings we should take away in terms of being ethically responsible developers for this, especially when you consider, in psychology, non-volitional phenomena, which is when you become immersed in the game, you come away from it, retaining some of the behaviours you had in that game. What are the warnings?
I can have a stab. So I think you're right. There are lots of with any new technology, there are great sides and there are bad sides. And I think addiction is I'm not sure it's that much more of an issue in VR than it is anything else. I think virtual worlds. We used to work in virtual worlds. We used to create games and things for virtual worlds, and people loved the fact that they were somewhere else. So they could be something different. They had a bad life in the real world. They could be in the virtual world. They could be a hero or a god. Really popular. And I think there was a danger there. There's a danger in computer games. There's danger in MMOs. There's danger in everything. I'm not sure VR is that much worse. I think we just need to be smart about what we're doing. And I hope there's an opportunity. We're all as developers, I think, trying to do things right, and we're not going to use tricks to get people addicted to our games so that they mess up their lives. But it's an issue just like any other form of technology. I think maybe I'm more worried about things like fear and people who are scared of snakes or spiders in VR. That is 10 times worse. That's a real issue. We need to think about how we deal with horror and how to give warnings out to people about content and that kind of stuff, because I think that's a more pressing issue, because things are just so much more heightened in VR that you can, a little fear of claustrophobia or looking down from a high height is so much worse in VR because you actually feel like you're there.
Joe, you might remember it. There was a Unite 2 or 3 years ago when someone, I don't think from Unity, but a psychologist was talking on stage about how it's not implausible that there might be a heart attack triggered by VR. Like, there is a serious responsibility with that kind of thing.
Yeah, certainly. I think that's on the YouTube Unity Unite archive, so if you want to go that's probably up to. But yeah, I think there's a huge responsibility from developers. I think there's a responsibility from developers in all aspects of game development, even pre-VR. I mean, you could argue that employing techniques that make a game incredibly compulsive, a moral, quite morally questionable, and should be regulated in the same way that the gambling industry is. If you're effectively using the same, feedback loop response but do things in a slightly different way. There's an argument for that, I'm sure. I just think we should all be pretty nice and do it that way.
It's a good strategy, and I guess bear in mind what the industry has learned. I don't know whether so there you go. Pass that down. Great.
So as we see VR and specifically the consumption of like 360 video become more prevalent in society, how long do you think it will be before we see like smartphone manufacturers, for instance, incorporating the ability to capture that and create like user-generated 360 video content?
So was the question how long before you can capture it with a smartphone?
Like easily. How long will before those features will be needed because people are consuming that content? I
would think pretty quickly. I mean, I'm unfortunately not privy to our long-term development plans in that area, but it stands to reason if a certain medium becomes popular or if it can be consumed in a manner which is deemed, in line with what we're trying to do with the technology, then it makes sense that gets integrated into our handsets. And I think much like you saw manufacturers integrated cameras for 3D capture when that became popular, I remember a number of handsets had that built in. I think logically it will become a stepping stone. How far out that is, I really don't know, but I would think, given the complexities in capturing it, probably a couple of years away.
I think one of the interesting things is that when Connect came out, we would think, this is a much more engaging and immersive way to interact with, say, gaming content. And what it kind of showed me was that human beings are insanely lazy, right? You just want to sit back on the couch and watch something. And now the question is, are we lazy enough to even just not want to even turn our head? We just want to watch a screen and consume some content. We don't want to move. We just and that's kind of, it makes me wonder whether 360 video might be a little bit niche and gimmicky. Yes, you can get a very emotive experience when you watch it, but at the end of the day, do we just want to sit back on the sofa and watch TV? Time will tell.
Oliver, did you want to respond to that? So, it is looking around too much on human beings.
Well, curiously, I've noticed two things. Currently, some of the best 360 video content I've seen has, in fact, just been super wide-angle 180 stuff, which is really good because you get past all the technical stitching limitations, you get around all the issues of delivering super high-resolution video. It's a much more technically feasible thing, and that's the sort of thing you might see in a smartphone. In the next few years, you might see a 170-degree lens in the back of a phone. But from the moving your head point of view, I've noticed it seems to be a generational thing. If you've grown up watching film and TV, you go, oh, this is really cool, and then spend the rest of the time looking dead ahead. For people or children basically, who've grown up with tablets and phones and a portable screen, they are much more willing to engage with the ability to explore the environment, whereas we're so used to watching a TV and go, oh, that's pretty cool, even I get to do it sometimes, I forget to look around me. Yeah. And I think that's probably something that will change with the march of time.
The young people always looking at things.
There's an interesting point, which is that, some of the guys might have seen me playing assembly earlier, and I noticed quite a few people, we've done the scenes before, and they sit down there and they stare straight ahead, and they might look a little bit, but actually, particularly with the face-forward headsets, people do tend to look forwards most of the time, and they know it doesn't stop it feeling amazing, it doesn't stop you feeling like you're there, because you can see stuff in your periphery, and you can turn and move a little bit, and it's still great, but actually you're still facing forward a lot. And some of the best 360 content I've seen has been focused primarily in front. You can occasionally look back, but you know what, most of the time you're in this sort of, 60-degree arc ahead of you and above you, and that's it, that's where you're focused on. I think a lot of games on my end as well will be like that, will be focused mainly on this area, even though there's other stuff that you can see if you really want to.
I think the perfect use case if we want to ensure that humans move their head is to place a 360 camera at the side of a court at Wimbledon, because then a little bit
So it's like a pond, basically. Great. Well, we have, with that point, taking us nicely back to the beginning of the video game medium, reached 5:30 exactly. So it's time to go and drink.